There is grief and frustration in Texas as the first funeral services are being held in Uvalde for the victims of last week's school shooting. Families are demanding answers about law enforcement's delayed response. It now appears that officers on the scene were aware that at least one child called 911 from inside the classroom where the shooter was targeting them. Let's get some insight on all of this from CNN counterterrorism analyst and former FBI senior intelligence advisor Phil Mudd. Also with us, active shooter prevention expert and retired police officer Chris Grolnick. Gentlemen, we appreciate you sharing part of your Memorial Day with us. Chris, I want to start with you because this apparent dispatch audio we played at the top of the hour, it appears that police had real-time information that there were kids in danger in the room with the shooter. What reasons would an incident commander at that point have to have his officers still wait outside the room?
Hello, Phil. Thank you, Boris. I appreciate the opportunity, but this is a tough subject to speak about. There is no excuse. The real-time intelligence was the sound of gunfire. A simple cursory look inside the window would show that something was desperately wrong. It was raining police, and they still did not go in. There is no reason an incident commander would form a perimeter after the 1999 tragedy at Columbine. Every police agency taught that, and I've been involved in an active shooter as a police officer at our department, and I have a master's degree, and my thesis is written on. I understand the time is of the essence, and if you don't go in, more lives are lost, and it's tragic. That's what happened here.
Phil, let's talk about the Department of Justice investigation, a review, really not a criminal investigation, but rather a review of the law enforcement response in Uvalde. What do you think the DOJ has to look at? What questions would you have?
Boy, there's a lot of them. Let me break down 2 or 3 basics. We just talked about communications, for example, and dispatches. There's a lot of police agencies involved here. Question 1, was communication consistent? Were officers getting different messages from different dispatch centers? What do you do about that if you're the commander on the scene? The next would be policy and sort of guidance to police departments. There's language around where people are saying that the officers thought someone was barricaded in the room, as we were talking about a moment ago. Do you draw a lesson that says, I don't care whether you judge the person is barricaded, there's a message from dispatch that says there are students that go in there, you do not have latitude to wait. So, and the final that I think will be really difficult is consistency in training. By training, I'm not talking about going to a classroom for an hour a year, Boris. I'm saying, what do you tell 17,000 police agencies across the country about familiarizing a tiny police department in active training that might be very expensive and take a lot of time when you may be dealing with as few as a handful of officers in a small department? There's a lot of lessons here, Boris. It's not going to be simple.
And what you just alluded to is such a tremendous challenge for communities like Uvalde, because nobody in that police department imagined that someday that was going to happen at their elementary school, at Robb Elementary School. I want to bring up what Texas state Democrats are formally calling for in gun control legislation. They've raised this issue as a reason to call a special session. They're arguing the state should raise the purchase age for a gun from 18 to 21 to require background checks for all firearm sales. They want to implement red flag measures to temporarily get guns out of the hands of those who might be in imminent danger. They also want to require a cooling off period for gun purchases. They would also regulate high capacity magazines. Chris, I'm wondering, which of these policies do you think might have the most impact, and which ones may be missing?
Briefly, to follow up on what Phil said, a barricaded person is not a barricaded person that's actively killing someone from start to finish. So he's absolutely correct. The policies that you're specifically asking about, we have to have everything on the table. There's not one magic policy that's going to fix this. If we just make this about guns, we're going to forget mental health. If we make it about mental health, we're going to forget about guns. And the training that this school had, they just had active shooter training. Maybe it's time to reimagine how we're training our department. Phil said it beautifully. We need to just do more than 1 hour or even a walkthrough. We need to have officers understand what the training is and the people inside the place what the training is. Has to be holistic.
I wanted to share with you and our viewers this striking image from the New York Times, a headline that says, quote, authorities said the gunman was able to obtain the weapon legally, and it's repeated 15 times for 15 mass shootings. According to the paper, through 2019, 3 out of every 4 mass shooters actually obtained their weapon legally. The NRA points to this, and they say that this is proof that background checks don't work and shouldn't be expanded. But Phil, one could look at that and say that it proves the opposite, that the country's background check system is broken and needs to be fixed, right?
Give me a break. Let me give you a four-letter word, and that is fact. If we had real hearings on Capitol Hill, let me suggest what might happen in those hearings. You would take countries where you have an equivalent level of mental health problems, for example, countries like the UK, Germany, Italy, France. You might bring in Japan and ask mental health and security professionals in those countries how they've limited attacks in those countries, including attacks by high-capacity magazines or by semi-automatic weapons. Bring in people who have experience with a fact, Boris, and you're going to get a consistent answer. If you want another answer, bring in the Australians who severely limited access to these kinds of weapons and ask them what their murder rate was and what their suicide rate was by these weapons after. And you're going to get a fact, which we will not see, I predict, in this debate.
Yeah, it's hard to stomach. It's hard to stomach that the likelihood is, at least given the fact pattern that we've witnessed before, that nothing will change even after the tragedy we saw in Uvalde. We hope, at least I hope, that I'm wrong about that. Phil Mudd, Chris Grolnick, gentlemen, thank you so much. Hope you get some barbecue today.
Thank you.
Of course.
Thank you.
On the same